Coming up, Kevin Durant made his return to Brooklyn and reminded everybody just how good he can be. A difficult loss for the Nets. Any silver linings to be had as the injury-riddled Brooklyn squad came out with a bit of a fizzle.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you'll find Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day, 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use promo code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And Doug, I tell you what, this Kevin Durant kid, I think he's got a future in the NBA.
I can almost imagine him in a Brooklyn Nets uniform. That's how good
I could. Right? If you squint, you can almost see it.
I have an imagination, so I would say that, like, you know, sometimes I let my imagination run wild, and I could almost picture him one day suiting up for the Brooklyn Nets and making a possible championship run if they could only assemble all the right pieces around him and maintain health, you know, for the entire thing. And also be able to keep all the coaches and make sure all the players can play and just everyone get along. Again, I'm letting my imagination run wild where Kevin Durant is concerned. But when you're thinking about the superstars, it's worth it because those guys are so good and those are the guys you want on your team. Old friend Kevin Durant back in Barclays tonight.
We dream a little dream. We dream a little dream, dare we? 136-120, just to put a nail on what the final score was here. It was the return of Kevin Durant. And there is, I will say, because ultimately this one gets away from Brooklyn in the third quarter. They played pretty tough, and we'll talk about some of the moments here and the players that they missed tonight in a big way when it comes to the size disadvantage. But I will just say that I remember having a conversation with you about how when they got Kevin Durant originally, I thought, boy, if they sign him to an extension, like, we may look back at the end of his career and say he's most known for from a year standpoint, playing with the Brooklyn Nets, made a couple championships in the bag, right? And you would think about him associated with this organization in a very different way than you think about it coming to this one, where he said all the right things. I miss it every day. Great culture, building things, came up a little bit short, yada, 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 yada. And then he went out and absolutely dumpstered the team that he played for just 6 months ago in a big way, coming up with 38 minutes, 33 points on a very Kevin Durant-like efficient 10-16 and 11-12 at the line.
And JJ Redick on the broadcast dropped the hammer too by just reminding everyone that's like, you know, hey, you're just reminding you what you missed.
What was that about?
No, it's true though. And we'll talk about the game, but you know, like you said, got the tribute video, which you definitely should have gotten. I know, you know, it's frankly silly to even talk about stuff like this. Like the guy, you know, the foot on the line stuff, having to relive that during the broadcast and just thinking about so close. He ultimately asked for a trade, but during the time he was here, you can't blame the Nets issues on him at all. Like he played absolutely all out. Like he was the consummate professional. Yes, he asked for a trade. It ended really poorly. You know, behind the scenes stuff wasn't working out. Maybe there were some moves in there that maybe he helped facilitate and they didn't work out. But like on the court stuff, like it was unassailable. He was amazing as a Brooklyn Net. And again, this game here is not like if you've been watching hoops basically since then, like it's like Kevin Durant really hasn't lost a step. He's been excellent this season also. But then to come back in the Barclays
this year too, of course.
Yeah, of course. And then, you know, come back at the Barclays, like you said, 10 for 16, 11 for 12 from got a little friendly whistle, but that's all right. 11 for 12 from the line.
Whistle for him.
Yeah, they forgot. The rest forgot sort of where his, you know, what team he was on. No, but it is a reminder too that, like, you know, the NBA is a superstar league. You have to have guys like this to be able to ultimately compete, right? The Kevin Durants, the Lukas, the Giannis's, the Jokic's. I'm not putting these guys in any order, but the Tatum's, like there's a small list of guys that you essentially basically need to have on your team. in order to compete. Kevin Durant's one of those guys. Like he is still, even moving up there in age, is still one of those guys that can take you to the promised land. Whether or not the Suns team gets there, I'm not sure. I don't think it will be because of him, though. Now, maybe he facilitates a trade to the Suns and they have to empty the coffers too much, and maybe the rest of the team is too light behind him. Look, that's a whole conversation. But ultimately, with Durant, as a fan, as a podcaster, I don't look at that as anything else but like, it was fun to watch him in Brooklyn. I'm bummed about the way it ended.
Of course.
But it's like, what are you going to do? Like not tip your cap for the time he was here? It'd be weird not to do that.
No, and it was that I had an awkward interaction over on social media around the tribute video thing, mostly because it doesn't matter, and you should give it to him, and you should be happy that guys played with you. And in a game like this tonight, kind of just to your point there, from a stat line and just from watching his game, and they also have, by the way, Devin Booker on this roster as well, right? They also have a second tier guy in Beal as well. Like there's other supporting cast that are obviously talented on their team. But it is we remember this watching Kevin Durant in a Nets uniform, the ease with which he can work down the court, get to his spots. You want to switch defensive assignments. You want to throw different looks at him. It doesn't really matter. Now, there were some times when you got some blitzing looks that helped a little bit, but in the end, like this is what the Brooklyn Nets have lacked, obviously, in the post superstar era, a guy that can just go get a bucket whenever you need him to. And it is I don't know, disheartening is probably not the right word, but it is that reminder. Every time the Nets go up one of these high-level teams with one of those elite superstars, you go, right, that's the missing ingredient. And there's only a finite number of these guys in the league. And Kevin Durant, of course, is one of them.
And we're going to talk about this like much later on. And then, for some of you on the podcast feed for tomorrow, because we'll talk about like sort of how it is that you ultimately facilitate getting these kinds of players on your team, because it's so rare to have them. Like I said, like there's a reason we can make this list and basically count it on one hand, right? Maybe we'll throw in some other guys at the back end and debate about whether those guys should be in the top group. But no one's really arguing. Maybe you might want to move the list around a little bit in terms of like where you rank them. But no one's disagreeing with the list, like the top 10 guys, right? And throw a couple more in there, Kawhi, Steph, LeBron. Like the list is 10 to 11 guys, basically. You need to have one of them. KD is one of them. When you have them, it's sort of like organizational protocol to hang on with a grip of death on it, like, and to do everything possible sort of to make it happen, right? Like unload all your draft capital to get James Harden. Okay, go do it. Like that's the way you can ultimately win, right? Okay, trade Harden away, try to get these guys on extensions, like get Simmons in the door, try to still make the team really good. All right, they did. It didn't work out. Ultimately, he moves on. But yeah, to have a glaring reminder of it doesn't feel amazing, especially with the state of the Nets as they stand right now, which is at a point of, I wouldn't even call it a total inflection point, but the graph is pointing not the same direction, obviously. And so to have it come in and have him sort of put his stamp down, it's just one of those reminders. I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but it just ends up being one of those things about why it is you work overtime to try to get one of these dudes on your team. Like it's just so important ultimately at the end of the day.
Yeah, what was the face of your franchise is now reminding you what your franchise lacks, right? That's what this felt like tonight, obviously. Coming up here in a second.
Yeah,
what worked early, Doug's he's bubbling for more thoughts he wants to give in here on Kevin Durant. What worked early for Brooklyn? This was a first half that was exciting and very engaged from a Nets perspective. What went wrong in the third and fourth quarters? We'll get into that coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made so easy. Prize Picks took all the best parts of fantasy, all the stuff you love, basically looking at numbers, going more or less on different stats for different players, piling those picks together, maybe winning up to 25 times your money. With basketball, you're picking a player, you're going more or less on their points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals. You can couple it together because I said you want to put up to 5 players together. You can go over there for football as well. Combine different sports. They got you all covered over on Prize Picks. Even Prize Picks even has a reboot policy. So if your entries stay live, even if one of your players gets injured, you're really not going to find that many other places. And sometimes those early game injuries can be absolutely brutal for some of your picks on other places. Don't worry about it, Prize Picks. They're going to get that entry rebooted. It's the only daily fantasy sport platform with injury insurance policies. Like I said, you can deposit $10. You can turn it up just into $250. That's 25x with just a few taps. Put in these picks in just a few seconds. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. It's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
All right, so as we continue on our post-game episode, we remind you, head over to wegotnets.com and get yourself a free ebook when you sign up with your email. It's 5 great stories in 5 days. And guess what? Kevin Durant and the superstar era is one of those things being covered. It's been getting great feedback, obviously, from everybody. They want more of them. Doug's got to get to work. So we got to crack down here and pump out some new narratives for you guys to check out. And you'll also be alerted when we provide some additional exciting content down the road. Now, back onto the game here, Doug. We can talk about, obviously, the size deficiency that was large and glaring here. But for the first 2 quarters of this game, kind of like in the second quarter, the Nurkić effect took hold here a little. It essentially was, if Nicholas Claxton is on the floor, then you can create some problems. Nurkić is not the most athletic big in the world. You take Nicholas Claxton off the floor. You don't have Dorian Finney-Smith. You don't have Sharpe. And all of a sudden, it just became such an obvious issue. And we can debate whether or not there was a solve on the roster or something worth trying. It just felt like there was a run here. I think 14 made baskets in the third quarter for the Phoenix Suns, and they were not of the variety of difficult. They were, hey, come down the court. You're concerned about Kevin Durant. Nurkić kind of wanders towards the basket, gets it, puts it through. It really broke down in a hurry after what was a highly efficient, productive first half from a Nets offensive perspective.
Yeah, so they basically tried to pick their point, knowing they were down, no Sharpe, obviously, no DFS, no Simmons. We'll talk about that, obviously, as well. They're down a lot of guys who can sort of like cobble together center minutes or just play center. And at that point, they were, and then it's not only that, they're left without those guys, but then basically forcing everyone to play up, right? Because if you break down the rest of the roster, it's like mostly guard, like some small guards or smallish guards, a few wing guys that are all pretty slight, and then like Trendon Watford, Harry Giles, and obviously Nick Claxton. Like there's very, very little size in this roster after that. Like it's a real problem. So I think, I don't even think, I know you can see it. The Nets basically picked their poison and decided, like, what are we going to do here? We could play Claxton as many minutes as possible, which they basically try to do. Or outside of that, we can just go super small and hope to trade 3s for 2s and get out in transition and maybe muck it up just enough on defense, knowing that we're going to get stuck in bad switches on Nurkić in the block, and we're going to hope that we can speed bump him enough. They didn't, right? So I think it was by design. I think it was a feature, not a bug. Like I'm pretty sure this was just the plan with the hope that it was going to be like, can we just force him to take Nurkić shots every time? And if we can just stop him enough, we'll be okay. I mean, at one point, Nurkić, I think led the team in field goal attempts. So, and a team with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, if Jusuf Nurkić is leading the team in attempts, you're like, I don't know, can I live with that without seeing the score? Maybe, right? And
3s are worth more than 2. Nurkić take 2. We try to get every 3 we can, right?
I think that was basically the plan. We can go back and forth about whether it was correct. Obviously, the result was bad, but you have to look at this through the lens of who they didn't have first. And it's not really an excuse. It's just the truth. Like, they don't have every guy that basically plays the 4 or 5 for them, except for Nick Claxton. Giles is buried. They don't want to play him. Watford is mostly buried at this point too. And so they picked it. It didn't work. And Nurkić, completely beasted on them. But like, I don't know. So I'm sort of a little stuck here. The result looks bad, and it looked bad in the moment. And you also have to recognize that, like, personnel wise, I mean, this team is so pot stuck. So I just don't.
A lot of other options.
There aren't that many. There really aren't that many buttons to push.
Yeah. And the only thing I think that I would say is I don't disagree with that strategy. I probably also look in it when you finish this game and you see 30 minutes for Claxton, I probably say, hey, listen, we're going to have to go small at some point, whatever it's going to take. He ended up finishing this game with 3 personal fouls. He probably needs to foul out in a game like this, right? Like, I probably need to push him as far and as long as I can. And if it ends up being fouls and picking him up because of switches and Nurkić, et cetera, I live with that. I probably want more minutes from him just because it's your best version.
Okay, so the one pushback I'll give to that is I agree with you. 30 minutes looks low. But in the third quarter, when they're down double digits, at that point, they're like, well, we're already down. Like, we just need to have everyone be able to shoot here. Like, we're already losing. Like, our only hope is to kind of...
more Claxton on the floor unless you think the defensive upside is so much stronger, he can't get you 3-pointers.
Right. And so I think that's a little bit where that 30 minutes comes from, right?
Mhm.
Because near the end, they're just like, well, we just need to have everyone be able to shoot or hopefully get out in transition. Now, the case against this is to say, it was pretty glaringly obvious. They tried the O'Neal at the 5 piece. It was so clearly not working, and Nurkić was so clear that at that point you do have to just do something different. Like you have to go to Giles, you have to put Watford in just for some more size. Understand that it's like not your first or second choice, but what you have to do something different because it does become glaring at some point, really pretty quickly with the 5-man with O'Neal at the 5 that like it just wasn't going to work. Valiant effort to I think try it, but you do have a couple other live bodies here that could have made this a little different, and they just really didn't do that. And I think you have to own that a little bit also. And so, again, the Nets were underdogs here for a reason. Phoenix is a good team. They're underdogs plus their personnel is bad. There probably was another button to push that they didn't do it. And I don't know. I'm waffling a little bit because I'm trying to recognize that they don't have the personnel, and I probably would have just done a little something different there in the middle.
Yeah, this is where the last note just from a lineup or the decision-making process about going small. You just look into a game like this, you say when you're missing certain players, everybody should just play more minutes. Like you should go deep if you need to. You should try the different combinations. And it really just does come down to maybe Watford. Again, Watford, because at least his minutes have been something when they've gotten down in games or when they've looked for a little spark. Giles, nothing really doing, came in. It was JJ Redick who said, Giles that comes into the game, an egregious foul at the top trying to set a screen. He immediately comes out, right? So I think there's just some clunkiness around getting him in there, and that's not a knock.
He also
on him.
never plays. He never plays. Like
it's not
so
a knock on him. Hey, step into this game against Kevin Durant and this squad in Phoenix, and why don't you go ahead and give us some solid minutes? It's a really rough spot. And ultimately, because we're going to talk about injuries here to close this post game out. Ultimately, you said it there too. It's a really good team in Phoenix, right? They're on a very good run right now. The last 2 games, as we highlighted, against Houston, against the Jazz, you go and look at their records. You go, oh, wait, maybe we've hyped them up a little bit more in our minds than we realized. This is a very good team. They are winning a lot of basketball games right now. And I think at that point, I look inside of it and say, hey, I see some nice things here, right? I see good box score numbers from a lot of the guys for the Nets. I like Johnson continue to look like his athleticism is coming back a little bit. If we want to be optimistic there, Lonnie Walker struggles and then starts raining some threes. So take the positive and treat it for what it is. A better basketball team that beats you up at home, right?
Yeah. I feel like we probably said that a few too many times is my only thing. Now, maybe this is the wrong time to draw the line in the sand around a certain team, right? Because it's just been a weird run.
Maybe we said it the wrong time the other times, and this is the time to say it, right?
Yeah, right. Like this could be it, and then there's maybe we'll let him off the hook a few other times. I'm not really sure. If I'm going to point out some weirdness that I thought in this, I don't disagree with this going small piece. I recognize that they just didn't have all the personnel. We also just still continue to see some weird rotations. Like Cam Thomas was tracking to play 28 minutes at halftime. He had played 14. He had 10 points on 4 or 6 shooting. And one of the better plus minuses on the team at that point. I just still don't totally get it. He finishes at 33 minutes because he takes a longer rotation in the second quarter, but ultimately finishes 11 for 19 from the field for 25 points. He was minus 11, but I mean, that's one of the better numbers among that starting group. I thought the defense, like, again, he's not the efforts there. Like he was digging down on some doubles. Like he was able to actually force a couple of turnovers on where they sort of like mini blitzed Durant when they had the non-shooters like a Koji on the court. So there were opportunities. I think like for him, he's always going to get picked on a little bit, but it wasn't even egregious in this game. And I thought he was there. I just still will not understand all these rotations around him, especially when you're short of bodies and you just can't, and you need the score. Yeah, you're going to give it up on defense. It's not like these other guys are like Lonnie Walker had played more minutes than him at one point, or they were like right in line. I'm like, I just don't get it. I just don't understand sort of like what's happening here. They claim that the relationship's good. And they claim that they're in on this guy, but there's just like, I don't know, like I tell my kid, you can tell me everything you want. Like your actions are going to speak louder than anything else. Like that's the only thing I can judge on. And when you get to halftime and he's super efficient from the field again, and he's played 14 minutes, I just will continue to confuse me. So I just got to take umbrage, I think, still with some of these decisions, even with the recognition that they don't have all the pieces. Actually, frankly, not having all the pieces should mean more minutes for him.
Well, and I was about to say, coming up here in a second, my final thought on this game, specifically Cam Thomas and the rotation decisions, and then we turn our attention to injury news and Ben Simmons. How glorious that 18 minutes was. Will we see 18 minutes ever again? We'll get into that in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Look, if you're like us, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat in the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. Cannot wait to get into all the action over there for Super Bowl Sunday on FanDuel. They got so many different props that you can just dive into. Really, it's one of these things where it's almost like too much to look at over on FanDuel. Like, players are going to score a touchdown, the points, right? Individual receptions, individual rushing yards, really drill down into every single way that you can think about. Super Bowl 58, FanDuel's got everything you can want. New customers join today. You can get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. You get that $5 in, you win. You're going to get $200 in bonus bets in time for Super Bowl Sunday. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we tie a bow on the post-game episode of the Brooklyn Nets, losing 136-120 at home to the Phoenix Suns in the return for one Kevin Durant. My final note, because we batted that around there going small, you can appreciate, you understand what you're trying to trade offer on. But then you bring up the Cam Thomas piece, and now I'll go back to Nicholas Claxton as well, and I'll put them together. They both should have been playing a ton of minutes. You should have been maximizing your best defensive player, Nicholas Claxton, and you should have been maximizing your best offensive weapon, best pure shot creator for himself in Cam Thomas. I understand the deficiency. I understand the run that happens there in the third, but at a certain point, I want to look at the box score and just say, did we use our best players to the highest level we possibly could? And when I look in it, ultimately the answer is no, because Cam Thomas plays 33 minutes, Mikal Bridges plays 40. If we're talking about your best players, he needs to be going toe-to-toe with minutes with Mikal Bridges in a game like this. There's no reason for him to be playing any less, or at least not very close to that. You mentioned Lonnie Walker. He ends up playing 31 minutes. He hits a lot of big shots, but you just got to run these guys into the ground here. And in lieu of not going to Giles more or not going to Watford more, that's 8 combined minutes. I don't need those 8 minutes from those guys. Give them to your other 2 starters. Give them to the players that matter most and give you the best chance to win the game.
Yeah, again, it just continues to be a total head scratcher. It's been a head scratcher all season with this guy, with some of these different lineups that they want to run, and even when, again, like, there's no excuse for it, and there's no excuse for not having him play every minute in the world at this point. Like, right. What's the team? Where's the team going? Like, why not? I don't understand. Like, anyway, we're going to talk. There's plenty of time to continue to talk about this. We got to talk a little bit about Ben Simmons. Obviously, one of the most disappointing pieces of injury news that we felt in some time. We promised ourselves we would not allow the Ben Simmons performance to get us too over our skis with excitement, because
I think we're fine.
Well, I realized how much that I had let it get to me, because when I saw the note that first it was bad news when he gets labeled questionable. Nets PR early in the day downgrades him to questionable with the knee, and then goes from midday questionables are never good signs, and then he goes to out, and you're like, I actually felt deflated, just because I was like, man, it's so brutal. I feel bad for the guy. I feel bad for the Nets. It's like, he was in the game late, and he kind of knocks knees. It looks like it's a nothing thing. You think he's going to be okay. Maybe it's them being overly cautious, but they said there was swelling, and you're like, how is there even swelling from this? Like, this is so crazy. And the guy just can't stay healthy. It's just one of these really, really unfortunate situations. And he looks as good as he possibly can look in that game in 18 minutes. And then to have it just be out the next game because of a little knock, it's a sign that every little thing is going to matter, right? Like, every little thing for this guy is going to matter. Unfortunately, it sucks. It just sucks. There's no other word for it.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because in a game like this, if he had played tonight, you'd be kind of seeing, hey, Ben Simmons was the leftover, the byproduct of the superstar era. But look what he can be for us, right? Look how the Nets can still come out of this thing. And this may be, as you said, overly cautious from Brooklyn. Maybe we don't see him for a couple of games, and then he comes back and it's okay, because it's not related to all of the other more serious injury issues he's had. But Not having him there, then it does feel like it's the double down. Had the superstar era, it doesn't work out, it all gets dismantled. You're left kind of in this weird limbo, and one of the guys that could be a silver lining to all of this now looks like injuries are just going to forever be a part of his career, right? If
you
it's
just have to
not gonna be
worry
serious stuff,
as a fan. You have to worry about every bump and bruise. Like
right, every
that's
jump,
just it.
every lob, every knock, every time he goes down, you're going to think,
Yes.
Is it okay? Does he get back up or not? And by the way, that has to live in the organization's mind and in Ben Simmons' mind at a certain point. Like, it has to live there. There's no way to avoid it. You come down seemingly with nothing at the end of a game, and all of a sudden you're out the very next day. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just like, I think that's the reality we live in. It's actually probably not it's things for him. So I hate to sometimes classify injuries into a commodity piece, because these guys are people, and I get it, and I don't want to.
This isn't his fault. I feel bad for Ben Simmons, right? Like, I feel bad for him.
Oh, of course.
But
I feel terrible for him, but it's just a reminder that, for as good as it looked that game, it's something that even if he comes out and looks great in the next game, I hope it happens every single time. We just can't, it's not bankable at all. Yeah. It's just that you cannot put it in the bank at all on sort of projecting out what the team can be. It's not part of the plan. It has to be a found money kind of thing at this point. Really, like just from an organizational level, on an emotional fan level, really on every level, like you have to just treat it like, oh, that's nice. But the part where you count on it all, and we could do multiple episodes about, how great the fit is and how he unlocks everything. It's like so clear. None of that is in debate. It's not in debate. Like, saying this stuff is not an anti-Simmons thing. It's just a pro sanity thing. Like, it's right. It's trying to just keep a measured tone around the guy who I just think from here till the end of his career, unfortunately, until he strings 50 games together of relative health, you're never going to trust. Maybe that's too many, but you know what I mean? Like, just
no,
what
I was even going to say is that even, we know where the contract stands. He's under contract next year. Even if he looks basically healthy next season,
doesn't matter.
The Brooklyn Nets aren't thinking, hey, we can build around with him as one of the focal points. You can't. You won't be able to do it. I could almost guarantee right now in this moment, without certainty, but the Brooklyn Nets are playing out his contract because there's just not a world where you can rely on him for what his talent is when healthy. You cannot occupy cap space and expectations inside of him. You have to look other places. And that's, by the way, maybe one of the reasons why they so value Mikal Bridges and the Iron Man streak that he's on. Because guess what? He's out there and he plays, right? And that sometimes is just as good as some of the loftier expectations. So a bummer on that front, a bummer losing the game to the Phoenix Suns, obviously, too. You lick your wounds, and the Nets will try to get back after it next game.
All right. You mentioned Mikal Bridges there and the Iron Man thing. We are going to come back here in a moment on YouTube, and on the podcast feed, it'll be a separate episode. And we're going to talk all about the news that came out about Mikal Bridges, about the possibility of the Rockets coming after and calling about the possibility of trading for one Mr. Mikal Bridges. So we're going to get into that here, like I said, in a second on YouTube. And in the next episode over on the podcast feed. In the meantime, make sure you head over to WeGotNets.com. Grab some stories, some of the good ones, some of the ones that just remind you about what being a fan is like. The highs and the lows and the heartache and all that other stuff. It's all there for you over on WeGotNets.com. Everyone likes something free. WeGotNets.com.
Today was good. Today was fun. Tomorrow is another one. Why, that's Dr. Seuss.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. Kind of. I kind of can't stand the books, but whatever. We'll be back again tomorrow and a moment on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, yeah. Coming up, when the Houston Rockets officially place a call for one Mikal Bridges, what is the responsibility of Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets organization to potentially reset their franchise timeline? We dive in, coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. Let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. And Doug, this is... I don't want to say that we talked about this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, that we speculated around the one scenario you could, should, or would trade Mikal Bridges would be if you could get back control of your assets. Now it's being reported that that could actually be a reality if Sean Marks and the Nets are willing to take those phone calls and have those discussions.
Yeah, so a lot to get into here with Mikal Bridges. A very busy Wednesday in basketball land when it comes to the Nets, because there was multiple different reports that I'm going to try to detail here to make sure everyone get the groundwork for sort of what came up. So first off, Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype comes out with a pretty lengthy sort of trade article detailing about how different teams just basically just doing a trade roundup, right? Like, so where different teams are going to be sort of heading into the trade deadline, but a little more than a week out. And sort of almost hidden in there was a piece, and I'll read the quote. He said, the Houston Rockets were among the teams to register trade interest in Mikal Bridges. Houston was prepared to send back several of Brooklyn's unused remaining draft picks from the James Harden trade, but talks never got to that stage because the Nets declined to entertain anything for Bridges when Houston inquired. Okay, so there's that, and then I'll get to my reaction to that in a second. Backing that up very quickly after was Shams Charania of The Athletic did a very detailed piece about the Rockets and just how that they have basically going, quote, star hunting now with basically coming from Ime Udoka and then sort of like the treasure trove of just picks, the Nets picks, and the players that they have, that they are in the market for a star going into this year because they want to make a playoff push. I'll pause here for a second. Before I even get to my reaction on this, when you see this, what's your reaction to the thing that we've long talked about, just from a logistical standpoint, about the possibility of the Rockets maybe inquiring here about Bridges and being willing to send? Scotto says several of the picks. There's only 4. It's 2 picks and 2 swaps. So it's like several means at least 3 to me, yep. Right? As a baseline. Yeah. When you hear that, that's the offer. And then the second part of it is the Nets refuse to entertain it. I have a comment on all that, but I'm curious to hear what your initial reaction. We actually really had never talked about this.
I mean, first and foremost, when we discussed the idea of, the only time you would do this type of trade is if it was Houston for control of your own picks. Okay. Yeah. But we also talked about it as in, what's the likelihood that Houston actually is willing to do it? Right? We talked about it so hyperbolically because we're like, there's no way that they... Yeah. Now, hold on a second. You're telling me that they actually said they were willing to do that? So that's the first part. Like, this is sometimes when we have our off-the-pod discussions, I'm like, hey, here's a far-fetched idea. And if it resonates with Doug from a practical standpoint and making sense for both sides, then we go down the road. So this actually validates that theory. So that's the first part of it. The second
one very small pause. We were the first ones on this. I'm positive. Yes. Like, we were the first ones to talk about this. We were the first ones to tweet about it and really entertain it as a conversation. We're in a lot of Nets chats and stuff. I don't take credit for this kind of stuff all the time. I don't believe we're first on everything. This one, among the grander narrative scheme, we were the first ones to really float this idea. So I am going to give us a pat on the back on timeliness. What does it win you? Nothing, but go ahead.
Houston Brass listens to the Locked On Nets podcast, as we know they do. They go, hold on a second here. These boys got something on us. So then you get to the piece of that the Nets are not going to entertain. They're not even willing to entertain discussions around trading Mikal Bridges. This is eerily reminiscent. I'll stay regional. The New York Football Giants in 2018 had the 2nd overall pick in the draft. And Dave Gettleman, the GM at the time, said, we're not taking phone calls. Saquon Barkley is a gold jacket wearing player. We're taking him. Don't look back. And very recently, it came out that the Denver Broncos were desperate to get up to draft Sam Darnold of all quarterbacks. And they refused to take the call. They were willing to give them the house to make that move. This is getting pretty close to that. Refusing to engage in conversations around Mikal Bridges and trade offers. We understand what Mikal's value is and what he represents, but this is all the picks from Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and everything, and then more, your own picks back in control. I know it's not a player, so I know what it represents and doesn't, but I'm shocked that at a minimum, there isn't more to this as far as what they engaged in. And we understand this could just be public reaction from Sean Marks from the net side of things, not necessarily what's going on behind closed doors.
Okay, right. So exactly. So I'll put the one caveat in here. If I was Sean Marks in the Nets organization, the first thing I would do to save face in the clubhouse and within the team is to say we're not entertaining in it. You can always go back and say we were blown away. Like you're always allowed to go back and say they blew us away. We couldn't say no. That's where we changed our mind. We weren't going to entertain it for anything less than a king's ransom, and they blew us away. So you kind of you walk the tightrope of not basically pissing off your best player, right? In Bridges, a guy that you've sort of attached like sort of franchise cornerstone monikers to at this point, and while also secretly being like, hey, you can still call us, right? Okay, so I do blink. There's probably some public posturing around here.
Yeah.
All at the same time, I think it's probably closer to the reality of like, we don't want to talk about it to we're actually entertaining it. Like if I had to put it on the scale. And when I read this, I was like, oh my God, it's actually going to happen. They have to do this. They have to at least seriously consider it. At minimum, it has to be very lengthy conversations looking at the two different paths here, because you don't often get a chance for like a take back, basically. Like this, and that's what this is. Like this is a full blown
double stamped, no erases,
Uno reverse card. Like get out of franchise jail. Like I said, I'm not like you don't get chances at this. These other trades, these other big, huge, like really everyone. Go back and look at all of them. Like where these huge pick hauls went out for these players. They don't get a chance to read. The Nets went through this. They didn't get a chance to redo the KG and Paul Pierce one. They had to eat it. Those guys had no value at the end, right? Like these, some of these other ones really just go through all of them with tons of picks and players attached. You don't get a chance. You hope that you either win and you can justify it by winning it all, or that you can grab a lot on the way out. And they got some for KD. They got a good haul for KD. They got something for Kyrie, right? They got nothing for Harden because they got a pick and nothing else because Simmons is toast, kind of. And now you have this chance to grab everything back and really set your organization along a somewhat uncomfortable but correct timeline if you want to engage with superstar players later on. They have to do it. Like it's a no-brainer to me. And anyone that pushes back, I feel like I have a really tangible argument, but I don't know. So I went long there, but I feel very strongly about this. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yep, no, 100%. And they did get a little first round pick action from Philly in the Harden trade as well. But that's a footnote to that, just to make sure we throw it in there.
Well, that was Dariq Whitehead, and he's out for the year. And I'm not saying anything about Whitehead. It's not his fault. I'm just saying that like look at what they got back from. Like
right.
They have nothing to show for it. They have literally nothing to show for it right now.
Right, late first round pick that turns into a dart throw at best, and sometimes an injured player. Right.
Yep.
Coming up here in a second, let's take it a step further. Why are we so convicted about making this trade? What is the trickle down effect across the rest of this roster, and how could it open things up for, in theory, a guy that could be the face of your franchise in Cam Thomas? We'll get into that in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, once again, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel, where we're going to say happy Super Bowl Sunday to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Look, could not be more excited for Super Bowl Sunday. Already doing some planning, and a lot of that planning, I got to tell you, has to do with around what's going on FanDuel, because they have so many different bets that you can put in. If you right now, you can grab $200 in bonus bets over there on FanDuel to use for Super Bowl Sunday. If your first bet of $5 or more wins, they have so many. If I started reading the player props that they have posted on FanDuel, we'd be here for the next hour. Like there's literally so much. I'm going to give you one that you can sink your teeth into now. Brock Purdy over 11.5 rushing yards. You saw the way he scrambled. You saw the way that he unlocked some of that stuff against the Lions. Really probably saved the game with his legs. Over 11.5 rushing yards for Brock Purdy over there on FanDuel right now. New customers join today. Grab that $200 in bonus bets. If your $5 bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we continue the discussion here around the Houston Rockets making calls to the Brooklyn Nets, to Sean Marks saying, we are interested in Mikal Bridges and we are willing to give, as we said, several of your first-round picks back. Doug and I safely assume that means 3. And who knows? Maybe the posturing here is, no, we want the 4th one. We want all of the picks back to get this done. Maybe we want players. So when you publicly say we're not interested in trading Mikal Bridges, as you say, it saves face inside the organization with your player.
Yeah.
And it also inspires maybe that team to say, okay, but what if I offered you this? What if I put a little more on top? What if I put a little more on top? I just went through this with Locked On Kings, right? I spoke with Matt George over there, and he asked about, it was a Mikal Bridges hypothetical trade. And he said, well, what if we said 4 first-round picks, da-da-da? And in that scenario, I said, you'd at least have to entertain it. It's not your own picks, but it's a lot, and players, etc. So when it comes to this Houston situation for me, that's phase 1. We both agree. You basically have to do it. If they're talking about 3 of your own picks back and maybe a player or the 4th pick, I feels like you have to do it. And then the phase 2 of that is Cameron Johnson. The phase 3 of that is Dorian Finney-Smith, is Royce O'Neal. You are talking about ending up with, including what you currently have, 20 first-round picks over the next 5 seasons. That is so much powder that you can keep dry until the right moment. And also it is dart throws. There's no guarantees in the lottery, but having control of your own 4 picks in theory means we can go to the bottom here. And that's not great. It's not a great outlook, but it means you can go to the bottom and have your best shot at a lottery, your best shot at getting a premier talent and building your core around them.
Right. Okay. So the unfortunate reality with the NBA, I almost said the NFL. I'm thinking about the Super Bowl there. Unfortunate reality with the NBA right now is that there's essentially 2 avenues to get superstar players in your team. Okay. The first is draft them, right? Like, and if you go through like teams that are in contention right now, many of the teams that are in contention, their best players are players they got through the draft. Luka, Jokic, Shea. Oh, I guess there's a second one with Shea, and that's a relative example here, which I'm gonna bring up here in a second. So the first one is you draft them. The second is you trade for them. The third is free agency, but that doesn't really exist anymore. All these players sign their first extensions right out of the gate. They all extend and they try to get traded later. Nobody hits free agency. No one young and good hits free agency anymore. The KD piece that happened with Kyrie was an anomaly. You're not seeing that happen with players of this caliber anymore, and you're going to see it less and less because everyone locks in their money early, and they should. They all lock in their money for the most they can get for their own team, and that's kind of the way it goes. So, and even to do that, to get those guys in trades, the second way, you have to unload some of your resources to do it, thereby crippling it, which is why the teams in the best shape right now are the ones that have drafted their superstars. Is it a guarantee you'll draft a superstar? No, it is not. Is it a guarantee that you will not sign a superstar in free agency? Yes. So I can knock off that one right now. It's like you will not be able, you really cannot do it. Go ahead.
Other guarantee is that, is a guarantee you draft a superstar? No. Is it a guarantee you have no chance to draft a superstar if you don't have a draft pick? Yes. Right. Like you have to have it. You have to have it to have the chance. Right. So it's still a better version of these scenarios.
Yes. And so the Nets are in a place now. And look, this sounds negative. It's really actually not. I think this is long-term positive. Like this is actually glass half full because but it's just taking a longer approach. Is it fun to watch a tanking team? No. Is it more palatable to watch a tanking team when you know there's like sort of a long-term plan around a lot of picks and stuff? Yes, because here's the other problem. The teams that you see get themselves in the most trouble by far, and I can give many examples of this, the teams you see get in the most trouble are the teams that hold on too long. They hold on too long to this hope that they're going to be good, and they're not because they don't have Jokic and they don't have Giannis and they don't have these other guys, Anthony Davis, Luka, Shea. Like they don't have these guys. They hang on too long, and now they're selling guys pennies on the dollar. Washington Wizards are the best example of this. The Bulls are kind of an example, are definitely an example of this. The Raptors are just going through it now. They're kind of mini resetting now, but they also have a guy in Barnes that they can kind of reset around. If you wait too long, you run into major problems. Teams that did it early or just early enough. Orlando did okay with this. Get rid of Vooch, Fournier. They get back in. They get back in the draft. They get Paolo. They get Franz. Like they get these guys, right? They get back in. And then go back to this other example I used before. The team that saw it the earliest was OKC. They had Paul George. They had him there. He was under contract. And they traded him for a haul that included Shea and a bunch of picks from the Clippers, and it was easily Easily the best thing. Is it great to trade Paul George away? No, it sucks. But
Of course.
it's the best way to then go out and be able to draft Chet Holmgren and draft Jalen Williams, and you have Shea in the door. It's so obvious to me. And I think it's just so short-sighted by the Nets. I'm sorry. Maybe there's something I'm missing. I just really don't think I am.
No, and honestly, because again, on the Mikal Bridges part of it, he's 27 years old. He's the Iron Man.
Yes.
He's chasing down the all-time record for consecutive games played. They said on the broadcast tonight, he played every single game at Villanova as well, 160 plus games there too. It's all awesome. It's all great. He's only going to get older. And because it's so amazing that he's been an Iron Man, only increases the likelihood that he starts to break down. Like the mileage is mileage, no matter what, no matter how you're built. So now you in this moment right now have teams saying 3, 4 first-round picks, control your own assets. We're willing to open it up for you. In theory, can you do it again next trade deadline? Maybe. Maybe Mikal gets hurt, or maybe he just doesn't look as strong, or maybe teams make other decisions and moves that don't have the draft capital to come and pursue you, right? And by the way, especially specifically when it comes to Houston, every year that you don't make a trade with them is a year that they make one of your picks, right? Is a year that they're using some of your draft capital to continue to improve their team. So now we've seen this on a lesser level. Ben Simmons is a great example of it, but Dorian Finney-Smith is the lesser example, right? Now he's out with an injury and you're not maximizing his trade value. So that's the other part of this. And I'll just
real quick, I'm going to jump in and say something here. And I never do this, but I'm going to comment on something that someone said here on YouTube. I'm not going to bring up the comment, but I'm going to comment this now because I know how this sounds. It says, basically the comment here is that we're too obsessed with wanting the Nets to be bad, right? That's not true. You have to understand. That's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. It's actually the want for the Nets to be great. Like there's a difference here. Like there's a want, like the understanding that I want the Nets to be great. Guess why I want the Nets to be great? Because when the Nets are great, the podcast does better. Like when the Nets are great, the YouTube views get better. It's like, this isn't rocket science, folks. The team is better. The show does better. Even forget even the fandom part, which I'm a fan and I want them to win. The difference is the way I view this differently, maybe than some other people. I am willing actually to forego short-term satisfaction for long-term upside. That's how I invest in things. It's how I go through things in my own personal life. And it's how I view the team too. I don't want the Nets to stink, but I also want the Nets to be great. And if we've seen the track record in the NBA of how to be great, by and large, this is the way. It's to control your own draft assets. It's to take many bites at the apple in the draft to get superstars that are cost controlled and on your team for a long time, starting when they were very young. Mm-hmm. If Bridges was 23, I would not talk about this way. Yep. If Cam Johnson was 22, I would not talk about this way. If Ben Simmons was 24 and we had time to kind of get this back on track, this would be different. They're not. They're older. They are starting the age curve on the downslope. This is not us wanting the Nets to be bad. It's wanting the Nets to be great. And for me, there is a very clear path that you can take, and the Nets have the opportunity to take that. And you don't get many chances to do it. I don't know how a better way to explain it.
No, we are on the same page when it comes to this. It's not reflective of how we feel about Mikal Bridges as a player or Cam Johnson as a player or about this collection of talent. You said it there. There is one path that they are on right now, and that is to be, we've seen the results, average, below average slightly, and make a particular move. Coming up here in a second, I think I'll further illustrate why making this move now is what the Brooklyn Nets need to do. Because the other path, which in theory is the path that they are holding themselves to, is not one that gets you to a championship. We'll break down why coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, once again, talk to our friends over at Prize Picks, our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy so easy on Prize Picks. You're not wrangling with salaries. You're not wrangling with sharks in the water. You're just going more or less on the Prize Picks projections. You can win up to 25 times your money by putting together 5 different players with their stats to go. So like with basketball, you're going more or less on the points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals. With football, you're going, more or less on the touchdowns, receiving yards, rushing yards, passing yards, all the stats that you love, all the stats that you know with all the players that you know too. You do some I know better stuff over there with Prize Picks, and away you go. Get yourself started on Prize Picks by going to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA. Getting all worked up. I like Prize Picks so much. Locked on NBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy.
So as we wrap up today's episode of the Locked On Nets podcast, focusing on a seismic opportunity that we never thought would legitimately materialize, even if, small pat on our own back here, we did discuss it at length in recent weeks. The other side of this is, if you believe, so why are the Brooklyn Nets, why would Sean Marks say we're not interested in trading Mikal Bridges? Because they believe that the next phase of this plan is to keep Mikal Bridges, keep Cameron Johnson, and then we're going to add in Donovan Mitchell in the offseason, right? We're going to go spend some of this draft capital we got to bring in that next piece. Guess what? I hate to break the news to you. If you go out and sign Donovan Mitchell, you're still another player away from being a championship contender. It's not one move. And what you sacrifice in the process of getting Donovan Mitchell leaves you in a similar position to where you were after you came out of the Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving era, not having a lot of draft capital, don't have control of your own assets, and now you are playing a good team, a more exciting team to watch than how they're currently constituted, but it's not championship level. And it goes back to what Doug said. I want them to be great. And being great means being in a position to actually have multiple superstars. And they don't have. You want to sacrifice all the draft capital that you accrued in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving trades? Fine. I do not see, at least right now, barring a Luka, right? Barring a Giannis becoming available in a trade, there are not two moves to be made here that take this team to that level. And oh, by the way, when you go to make those trades, guess who they might be asking for? Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, some of the core pieces that you believe help you get over that hump.
All right. So, and for people that haven't listened to us before, I'm going to do the caveats that we've always put with the Bridges trade. I'm only advocating trading Bridges to the Rockets. I do not want to trade the Bridges to any other playoff team for 5 picks that are all going to be effectively second rounders for years. Like, I don't want trade him to the Knicks or trading him OKC, like anywhere else, because those teams will be good. I'm not interested in their picks. Those will still be out of your hands, right? Like sort of like the Phoenix picks are now. So that's caveat number 1. Caveat number 2 is I'm also only advocating if they get all of the picks back, everything back from the Rockets. They have to get both picks and both swaps. The swaps are important here because the Nets will just be getting the swaps back now. Like they're in a sweat now where they have to they could be giving those swapping back to the Rockets if they end up being bad. The Rockets are probably going to be pretty good. You're never going to swap with them. So don't worry about it. You can take the swaps back too. They have to get all 4 of those back, right? For me to entertain it. I'm working the assumption that they would do that. That's around the asking price for Bridges now, 4 picks, right? Or what's been offered. So I think that's reasonable. If they're able to attach other stuff here to grab like an Amon Thompson, a Cam Whitmore, all the better. You should hold out for the max. I am not saying, no one is advocating here to just go pennies on the dollar because the Nets can go into a soft tank. I'm saying you go for you have a chance to go for everything. You should do that. So I really want to clarify here. This is literally the only package I would accept for Bridges. No other team. I don't want it. Really outside. Really, this is it, right? So I think that's an important clarification here around, because I think I can see this getting interpreted like trade Bridges for picks. No. Only these picks. These are the only ones. I don't want these other good team picks. They're not going to be worth it. So I think that's an important distinction to make here.
No, 100%. The other thing I think that I'll put it as kind of the footnote here, and this isn't why you make this trade. You make the trade for control of your own assets. The other side of it is, I mentioned his name at the top. What's the plan with Cam Thomas? Is he a guy that the organization likes? Are they even mildly fond of him? Do they believe in him as maybe being one of the core who is young and can carry this team forward as you add in other young talent, as you bring along these draft picks and you try to add pieces in? I'm not saying that you trade away Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson so you play young guys and Cam Thomas gets to run 48 minutes with the ball in his hand all night, but it would be a nice side effect of if you clear out this iteration, this mindset from the organization that we're still competing for the playoffs this year, that the 10th seed in the play-in tournament is an achievement worth celebrating. If you go the other way, you get to free reign. Cam Thomas, by the way, and he's developed, and you're seeing these little glimpses, and he's growing, he's getting better. He's an elite level scorer right now. So let him cook for the rest of the year and go into next season saying, if he is a part of, and you can say that about any player you want, if he's a part of our core identity going forward, we start to construct the roster accordingly. The other thing that we've consistently said, I should say, about these trades, the Nets got the best value they possibly could, picks and players in the Kyrie Irving and the Kevin Durant trades. It doesn't mean that they all fit together. We always say, right, these guys are all good individual players, but their value often lies somewhere else because they fit in with other systems and other elite talent around the league. That's the other big, I think, discrepancy here. It's not about how good Mikal Bridges is. This is telling you how that good teams are willing to give 4 first-round picks or your total control back of your franchise. You have to be willing to do that to clear out this clouded judgment around maybe we can get ourselves back to another level. You didn't get there with the superstars in the last iteration, by the way, for a whole bunch of reasons that were highlighted on a tribute video tonight. Control your own destiny, right? Control your own destiny. You have players you think you like in your pipeline already. Be young, be OKC, follow the OKC model. And guess what? If 2 years from now, long-winded, I know, if 2 years from now, you're a team that's winning 45 games and is in the playoff picture, 6th seed, whatever, but you're young. That's different. You said it before. Like, that's different than watching 27, 28-year-olds try to compete to scrape into the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, it's tough. Look, I get it. Like,
I'm speaking negatively about guys that I really do like as individuals.
No.
Players,
and look, these are tough things. Like, it would be easy to say never do this. It'd be easy to just come on the podcast and say, trade for Donovan Mitchell or trade for the next superstar or hold out. Yeah, I get it. Like,
trade for Wiggins.
That's what's that?
Said trade for Wiggins. I'm kidding.
You're right. Like, I get it. Like, that's what people want to talk about. And frankly, the reality is that's probably what we will be talking about. Like, that is probably what will happen. But the strong possibility here is the trade deadline comes and goes and the Nets don't pull this move because this is a really tough thing to think about. And they have other things they have to think about. They have to sell seats. Like, if the fans are important, the money's important for these guys. And it's hard to sell seats for a team that's really, really bad. Right. And so around a fan base that might not be, the most robust to begin with. Right. And so I get why this is hard. But I just think it's so important to at least bring up as a possibility, because I do think if you think about it just rationally and logically through the lens of how the rest of the league operates, and when you see the teams that are great and sort of how they got there, if you look at the two different roadmaps, it just becomes like really obvious. Now, look, you still need to have things go right. You can still be the Hornets and like be this year every year and be bad, right? Like 100%. You need to have a good organization. You need to draft well. Like, you have to have other things go right. Like, you can draft in the lottery a lot and still kind of stink. Like, there are teams that do that. So there's no guarantee. But if you just look at it, if you believe in the organization and you believe you can draft well and you believe you can kind of like take a longer form approach, if you just look at the success through the rest of the league, this is mostly how these teams got there. Just go down the list and look at the best players in the teams and how they acquired those players. Almost always, not always, but almost always, the base was through the draft and then filling in like the rest of the guys around them. And if you don't do it that way, it is just so much harder. Again, You can do it. It's possible, but it's very hard to get to the promised land. And the promised land is winning the championship. And I think what are we doing this for? We're in here to win championships. Like, that's it. That's the goal every year, is to raise the banner. Yeah. And I just think that's the way. And the best way to do it is to get as much control of your draft as you can and to make really good organizational decisions after it. It's not the only way, but I think it's the highest likelihood way to do it.
And sometimes it needs to be painful, right? Like, sometimes it needs to be painful, and you can be optimistic in the short term about Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson. And it is like, I prefer them not to have to maybe go low in order to ultimately get high. Right. But that's actually, we had this conversation about Sean Marks the other day, the fortitude, right? Does he have the fortitude to make the hard choices now that these are his mistakes that he's trying to correct, not the mistakes of previous regimes? We'll see what plays out. I don't think either one of us believes this is likely to actually happen, but the mere fact that it's being reported at least means that there are real discussions happening around the league, around the Nets, around Mikal Bridges. And if Houston is that desperate, if they believe they have a window for themselves, man, I'll tell you what, we hear after the deadline that this didn't go down and it was all 4 picks and maybe a couple of players. I'll be disappointed. And even though I shouldn't be, I'll be shocked. I'll be shocked if they don't pull the trigger.
Yeah. So anyway, again, reminder, not negative, positive over the long term. Like, it's important for people to understand that. I really can't. Yeah. I feel like I have to say it. I feel like I have to give an asterisk here. Like, it's because it sounds, I know the way it sounds, but you really have to hear it through, like, you have to hear it through the shell where it's like putting out like, hey, this is ultimately for the best. And we might have to delay some short-term gratification around a team that has $42 million of hurt all the time Ben Simmons on the roster, right? Has guys that are trending toward the wrong side of the age curve here. at 27-28. That's getting to be the wrong side. Like, so it's not like these are just other considerations. And then just look at the teams that got mired in sort of like NBA no man's land. It's the teams that just simply waited too long, that thought they had better chances than they actually did. And that's where you can get yourself in the most, it's easily where you can get yourself in the most trouble. It's what teams do time and time again with this. They just wait too long to be able to look themselves in the mirror about where they are. And if they don't do this, I'll tell you right now, they better guarantee this will be my last thought. If they did not pull a trade like this off, they have to somehow pry loose one of those top 10 guys, top 15 guys, like I just said, because otherwise you really blew it. Like, that's the other way. Go do that. If you don't do this, then definitely do that on the top 15 guy. If it's neither of those things, brutal beat. All right, we're going to get out of here. Much appreciated, everyone.
Again, positive.
That jumped into, what's that?
I said, again, we're positive about this.
I'm fired up, man. Much appreciate everyone that jumped in to YouTube. Usually we take live stuff here tonight, but we rolled through a couple different episodes. So I think we're going to probably bounce out of here as we head into the late hour. Make sure you join or go over to wegotnets.com. Grab that free ebook that we talked about. Totally free to you. We put a lot of work into it, but it's not even the work. It's the love and care we put into that free ebook. Wegotnets.com.
You can smell it in there. I have a quote here. Don't worry. I was just getting lost in
Go for it, buddy.
Definitely check that out. At the end of the day, if I can't say I had fun, it wasn't a good day. That's Simone Biles. There you go.
One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.